Mr. Speaker, but to simply say that at this stage, Canadians need to know how difficult this balance will be. Thank you.
And the honourable member for Victoria will have 3.5 minutes remaining in his time when the House next gets back to debate on the question. And of course, he'll have the time for questions and comments following that as well. Maintenant, nous allons procéder.
We will now move to statements by members. The honourable member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, this week, 2 members of the Catalan Independent Movement were imprisoned for having organized a protest. This week, Spain decided to take control of Catalonia and to withdraw its autonomous status. This week, Madrid decided to impose regional elections in Catalonia in order to defeat President Puigdemont. This week, the right to self-government was once again denied. Freedom of expression and freedom of association were trampled on. And in order to not cause any displeasure to Spain, the Government of Canada said nothing. This silence, Mr. Speaker, is shameful. This is shameful. Canada refused to condemn violence. Canada refused to condemn the anti-democratic measures of the Spanish government, and Canada is not condemning political imprisonments. That makes Canada an accomplice. And the Canadian government calls itself democratic. That is pathetic.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm pleased to update the House on an incredible Small Business Week 2017. This week, our government announced that we are delivering on our commitment to reduce the small business tax rate to 9% while making our tax system fair for all Canadians. The BDC held over 200 events across the country, and here in Ottawa, members of Startup Canada met with their representatives during Startup Canada Day on the Hill. As a former small business owner, I know that small businesses are the lifeblood of Canada's economy, employing nearly 10.5 million Canadians. During Small Business Week and every other day, our government will be celebrating and supporting our hardworking entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, this week I received a letter from a man named Bill addressed to anyone who cares. The letter expressed how his life would be drastically changing as a result of Liberal government news tax changes. Bill's family business did not survive the high interest in 1982 under the Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Relentlessly, he started all over again, but by 2007, he had to retire at the age of 75. He wants to leave something behind to his children, who gave so much and contributed so much to their family business. However, because of these news tax changes, he is afraid that he will no longer be able to do so. I want you to know, Bill, I care and I will fight for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the honour of welcoming 35 young Canadians from Rankin Inlet to Etobicoke Lakeshore as part of a hockey exchange with students from the Etobicoke Canadians in Mimico, a neighbourhood in my riding anchored in, among things, hockey. In fact, Mimico is home to 5 recent Stanley Cups and many hockey heroes. As part of Canada 150 celebrations and the 100th anniversary of the NHL, Encounters Canada, financially supported in part by the federal government, organized the Youth Cultural Exchange to foster a better understanding of our country and our people through one of our country's shared passions. As the students visited hockey landmarks such as the Hockey Hall of Fame and recorded a segment on Hockey Night in Canada and, of course, played hockey, they shared experiences and got to know each other well. The Mimico students head north next April to continue building on what I know will be lifelong friendships and learn about life in the north. What an amazing opportunity for them, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate them on a successful visit to Etobicoke and wish everyone a meaningful trip to Rankin Inlet next year.
Bravo. Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Being given a jigsaw puzzle and turning out the lights. That's what a young veteran with PTSD told me it's like to deal with Veterans Affairs. My Nanaimo Ladysmith office is flooded with urgent calls from desperate constituents who can't access the services they need. They're frustrated trying to get guaranteed income supplement, tax refunds, immigration OKs, old age security and pensions. Wait times stretch from weeks to months to years, and waiting years for family reunification means children grow up without their parents. People with disabilities, seniors, low-income Canadians are left in limbo while they await crucial approvals and financial support. Staff are scrambling to deal with the ever-growing backlog. It's time for this government to hire back the workers that Conservatives cut and give Canadians the services they deserve.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Fredericton.
50 years ago, on the eve of Canada's centennial celebration, the Centennial Voyageur Canoe Pageant set off on a HoC Canada voyage.
This 3,300-mile paddle was completed in 104 days, taking the voyageurs from the Canadian Rockies across the country through rapids, countless lakes, and strenuous portages all the way to their final destination, Expo 67 in Montreal.
Of Canada's Confederation, we welcome these voyageurs to our nation's capital as they mark the 50-year anniversary of their extraordinary trek. Ayant tenu le record.
In the Guinness Book of Records for the longest canoe race in history, this achievement is a reflection of the Canadian spirit, one of courage and determination that commemorates our past, while we also look ahead to the next 150 years.
Will join me in celebrating the accomplishments of the Centennial Voyageurs and thank them for their continued contributions to Canada.
The honourable member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Mr. Speaker, there are awards, and then there are awards. Maclean's has their Parliamentarian of the Year awards currently underway, but did you know the first of 4 prestigious awards for the Code of Silence has just been rolled out? This highly undesirable award is presented by 4 media groups. Now, one would think that the Finance Minister would be a shoo-in for this outstanding honour for most creative use of loopholes. But this year's award goes to Ottawa's point man on access to information reform. The member from Kings Hants, the Treasury Board President, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations for turning the Prime Minister's office into a bastion of secrecy, free from the obligation to respond by pesky groups of citizens requesting information on how their tax dollars are being spent. Once and for all, congratulations.
The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This past weekend, a constituent stopped me and gave me a compliment I never thought I would hear. Nice heels. I'm already seeing a number of strange looks, but indeed, Mr. Speaker, I rocked that pair of open-toed, sparkling silver high heels as I walked through the mall. For the 3rd year in a row, I participated in the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes fundraiser to benefit our local women's shelter, Jillian's Place. You don't have to look far, Mr. Speaker, to see the terrible impact of gender-based violence. In Niagara alone, there were over 8,000 911 calls a year for domestic violence. Or if we look at our social media feeds, we see the impact of the #MeToo hashtag. Jillian's Place has served as a beacon of light for victims and families. They provide counselling, accommodation, and other countless services. Given those affected by gender-based violence a safe place to regroup and plan their future. This year, with over 300 participating, $110,000 was raised, helping support programming and operations. Strides have been made to stem the tide of gender-based violence and harassment. This walk reminds us to recommit ourselves to bringing an end to these heinous acts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
For World Mental Health Day, I would like to introduce the House to Kelty Patrick Dennehy, who grew up playing hockey, golf, and snowboarding in Whistler. At 16, Kelty experienced extreme anxiety but seemed to recover. For grade 12, he went to Notre Dame College in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, but his anxiety returned. He became despondent, and he came home to Whistler and his loving parents. On March the 2nd, 2001, he took his own life. Devastated, the Dennehy's established the Kelty Patrick Dennehy Foundation, raising $7 million so far for Canada's first standalone mental health centre for children and youth, a depression research chair at UBC, and the remarkable and innovative Kelty's Keys online therapy program. Dedicated to the mental health of young people, the Dennehy's are hopeful that mental health issues will be treated like any disease, be free from stigma, and that people will have the help they need. Canadians are very grateful to the Dennehy family.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. 20 years ago, on October 13, 1997, in the town of Les Éboulements in my riding, 4 to 3 residents of Saint-Bernard-en-Beauce lost their lives in the worst road accident in Canada's history. The coach, carrying members of the Golden Age Club, crashed in a ravine at the bottom of the steep hill in Les Éboulements. The 43 victims were all highly involved in their parish, and they left behind them a legacy and immeasurable strength for their future generations. 20 years have gone by since this tragic event, and we are still thinking of those men and women who lost their lives. 2 communities were touched by this dark moment that changed the face of these regions. Les Éboulements and the rest of Quebec never forgot you, and we never will.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, last week in my riding of Kelowna Lake Country, I had the pleasure of attending the 2017 Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Awards. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize all the companies and individuals that were nominated for an award and to take a moment to acknowledge the winners. Current Taxi, BC Tree Fruit Cooperative, Rotary Centre for the Arts, Crew Marketing Partners, Vol Inspire, Hybrid Elevator, New Cap Radio, Northside Industries. The Young Entrepreneur Award went to Andrew Gauthier. And finally, the Business Leader of the Year went to Lane Merrifield. I also wanted to compliment the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce for putting on a first-class event. Mr. Speaker, small business not only creates local employment opportunities, it provides goods and services that increase the quality of life in our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, the lives of 2 late members of the Canadian Armed Forces were cut short in the tragic events that occurred in Saint-Jean and Ottawa. Canada will remember Adjutant Patrice Vincent, who died on October 20, 2015, leaving behind his bereaved family and his colleagues. 48 hours later, a second senseless attack took the life of another brave Canadian, Corporal Nathan Cirillo, killed while standing as guard of honor at the National War Memorial. The members of the Canadian Armed Forces work every day in ensuring a peaceful environment for all, sometimes risking their own lives. We thank them all for this. Today, our thoughts go out to the families, friends, and colleagues of Adjutant Vincent and Corporal Cirillo. We thank them for their bravery and dedication, and they will forever stay engraved in our memories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, when facing the most devastating of disasters, it is also the time when we witness the most inspiring of miracles. Hear, hear. In harrowing times, heroes have arisen to face the flames. These heroes are our firefighters. 1 month ago, fire ripped through Waterton Lakes National Park, and when I toured the aftermath, I was speechless to see the park's precious landscape ravaged by the wildfire. Much was lost: ranches, homes, campgrounds, stables. The devastation to one of the most beautiful places on earth was staggering. However, what I also saw was nothing short of a miracle. I saw the battleground where firefighters and Parks Canada staff stubbornly stood their ground to save Waterton Lakes National Park town site. Unbelievably, cottages, shops, and the iconic Prince of Wales Hotel stood undamaged. I proudly stand in the House today to recognize those who helped save Waterton Lakes National Park, a beloved Canadian treasure. To all the men and women who have fought and continue to fight the fires in southern Alberta, for your tireless and courageous efforts, I humbly say thank you.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we learned the sad news of the former Senator Michael Pitfield. He was an exceptional man who contributed to the modernization of the public service and to the repatriation of our Constitution. Mr. Pitfield had a long and brilliant career following his law studies at McGill University, and he began his career as a civil servant in 1959 at the Department of Justice.
Clerk of the Privy Council of Canada and Secretary of the Cabinet under Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. In 1982, he was appointed as an independent senator. Senator Pitfield was never one to rest on his laurels and remained vigorously engaged in Canadian society even after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He then worked tirelessly to raise awareness for medical research in the field. We offer our condolences to his children, Carolyn, Thomas, and Kate, as well as to many other Canadians whose lives he touched.
The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, I again rode my bicycle through the South Okanagan and West Kootenay at the end of August. I took a day longer than last year, but then I did cover more territory, about 519 kilometers in all. It was hot and smoky, but I enjoyed warm receptions and good conversation in cafes along the way. And I was joined by keen cyclists on the rail trails that form most of the route. The beautiful Kettle Valley Railroad Trail from Big White down to Midway, from Naramata to Okanagan Falls and beyond, the newly resurfaced Kettle Valley Heritage Trail east of Grand Forks, the Galena Trail along Slocan Lake, and the beautiful rail trail down the Slocan River. These trails are significant economic drivers in small communities along the route. About 300,000 people use parts of the KVR every year. And the trails are maintained by hardworking volunteer groups in these communities. So I call on the government to support these groups and the work they do to support our rural economies. Thank you.
For Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, in 2011, the United Kingdom introduced the Armed Forces Covenant. The covenant passed in the UK Parliament states that those who serve and their families should face no disadvantage compared to other citizens in the provision of public and commercial services. It further states that special consideration is appropriate, especially for those who have given the most, such as the injured and bereaved. Our Canadian Armed Forces sacrifice the same freedoms and face the same dangers. Our nation has a moral and sacred obligation to the members and families of the Canadian Armed Forces. They deserve our respect, the support of their government, understanding the uniqueness of what they and their families do for our country. As former opposition critic for Veterans Affairs, I believe we owe our veterans no less of a military covenant than that recognized by the United Kingdom, the first and only country to do so. It's my sincere hope that all veterans will have the same covenant bestowed upon them by the Government of Canada and all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, our government consults Canadian men and women. The members here in this House met business people, met chambers of commerce, met producers throughout the country. And, Mr. Speaker, it is after these consultations that the Minister of Finance presented this week his plan in order to make sure that we have a fair tax system. For example, under this plan, our SMEs will be able to set money aside for retirement, set money aside in order to ensure that they can take, for example, parental leave, and to also ensure that they don't penalize the transfer of businesses to the next generation. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of our government, I'm proud of our members, I'm proud of our Minister of Finance, who listened to Canadians throughout the country and made sure he took concrete steps based on what he heard.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member for Carleton.
No one in Canada has more power to enrich the fortunes of an individual company than the finance minister. He's put forward legislation creating target benefit pension plans that his company sells. He's put forward tax proposals that would force small businesses to put money in individualized pension plans, which his company sells. The Bank of Canada, for which the finance minister is the only shareholder, gave lucrative renewed contracts to his company while he was minister. Does this government and this prime minister not see the obvious conflict of interest in all of these actions?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important to remember that immediately after he took office, the Minister of Finance made contact with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that he was respecting all of the rules that govern us in this House. The Ethics Commissioner recommended that he implement a screen against a conflict of interest. But yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance went even further. He announced that he would be placing his assets into a blind trust and that he would be divesting his Morneau Shepell assets. I think it's important to remember that the Minister of Finance is a man of integrity who is committed to public service, and he's achieved great results over the last 2 years.
Carleton.
The honourable member for Carleton.
The minister thought it was appropriate to own $20 million of shares in a company that he regulates. Why did he suggest to the media, to his caucus, and to Morneau Shepell that he'd put it all in a blind trust? It reminds us of the offshore company in France that he broke the law in failing to report to the Ethics Commissioner from the start. This minister always does the right thing after he's caught doing exactly the opposite. When will the minister reveal all of the investments that he has in his 9 numbered companies and trust funds across the country?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is expected of all parliamentarians, including ministers, is working with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that the rules that govern us here are followed. That is exactly what the Minister of Finance did when he came to power. And, Mr. Speaker, in a public letter yesterday, the Minister of Finance wrote to the Ethics Commissioner, and she gave him her recommendations, and all of the facts are public, and he is following the rules. Now, the minister has gone even further by announcing new measures to ensure that any appearance of conflict of interest is also avoided. He is a man of great integrity. The honourable member for Carleton.
Talks about an ethics screen requiring the minister to recuse himself from any matters affecting his company, Morneau Shepell. 3 questions. Did he recuse himself from any discussions on the Barbados tax haven where his company has a subsidiary? 2, did he recuse himself from any discussions on target benefit pension plans from which his company stands to profit in the millions? And 3, did he recuse himself from tax policies forcing small businesses to invest in individualized pension plans from which his company stands to profit?
Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the guardian of integrity in this House is the Ethics Commissioner. And the Finance Minister has been working with her from the very beginning to ensure that he has respected the rules. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance announced that he would go even further in the interest of transparency, and that he would be placing all of his assets into a blind trust and divesting himself of his Morneau Shepell assets, because we don't want to be distracted from the important work that this finance minister has been doing for Canadians. The honourable member for Richmond North Athabasca. Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I could speak to the Ethics Commissioner, too. It's been 2 years that the Finance Minister has been hiding the truth about his personal finance. For 3 weeks, the Minister has been trying to defend how he managed his assets. For 3 weeks, the Minister has been trying to defend the indefensible by saying that all of the rules are followed. It took 3 weeks of backlash from Canadians for the Minister to finally decide to recognize that changes needed to be made. Will we have to wait another 3 weeks before this Minister realized that what he's done is wrong and that he actually does what's necessary and apologize to the Canadians?
Secretary of Parliament.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The member that the Minister of Finance has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner, has followed all of her recommendations, namely to set up a conflict of interest wall. And yesterday he's announced that he would go even further. But if he wants to talk about the last 2 years of the Finance Minister, Mr. Speaker, I might respectfully remind the member that 2 years ago we were debating whether the Canadian economy was in or heading into a recession. Right. 2 years later, fast forward 2 years later, the Finance Minister has steered the Canadian economy back into the right direction, the direction of growth, of prosperity, but most importantly, of prosperity for all Canadians. Thank you.
Honourable member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, I'm fascinated to see how the Parliamentary Secretary is still managing to defend the Minister of Finance. Canadians have learned that the Minister of Finance is in a state of conflict of interest, and this week in the media we learned that his own firm may have gotten an $8 million contract with the Bank of Canada to manage their pension fund. Now we've learned that the Minister of Finance was receiving dividends when he was a member of more than $6,500 per month from his own company. People wonder why Canadians are cynical about politicians. Well, does this minister realize that he's in a state of conflict of interest? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I would remind everyone that the guardian in charge of preventing conflict of interest in this House is the Ethics Commissioner. The Ethics Commissioner has worked with the Minister of Finance from the very beginning, transparently and with integrity. He followed all of her recommendations. And yesterday, to avoid any distraction from the important work that he's doing for Canadians, he decided to go further than what the Ethics Commissioner recommended and to place his assets in a blind trust and to divest his shares. He will work with this ethics screen to prevent conflicts of interest as recommended by the Commissioner.
For Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister initially said that he was just following the recommendations of the Ethics Commissioner, while ignoring what the Prime Minister told him he had to do in his mandate letter. But yesterday he announced he was going to take action to fix the situation. Even if he were following the rules, he must understand that any reasonable person would conclude that at the very least he was in an apparent conflict of interest and certainly failed to exercise the kind of judgment you'd expect from a finance minister. Will he now apologize to Canadians for breaking their trust?
Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance, as I've mentioned, has always followed all the directives of the Ethics Commissioner, and namely to set up a conflict of interest wall. And yesterday, in a letter made public of the Ethics Commissioner to the Minister of Finance when he entered office, she said about that conflict of interest wall that it would ensure the integrity and impartiality and maintain the public's confidence and trust and integrity in the Minister of Finance. I think it's important to mention that the Ethics Commissioner is safeguarding ethics and conflict of interest here to make sure that they're avoided and perception is avoided. The minister has always followed her directives, but he's announced yesterday he'd go above and beyond to avoid the distractions that this is causing. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Victoria.
Let's blame the Ethics Commissioner. The Finance Minister says he's working for the middle class, all the while attempting to justify that his actions were ethical, showing again just how out of touch he is with the reality facing most Canadians. The minister is in charge of the country's finances, and he shouldn't be allowed to maintain control over tens of millions of dollars in personal investments in a company he regulates. That's common sense. When will he take personal ownership that what he did was wrong and just apologize to Canadians?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've mentioned, the Finance Minister immediately after the election has started working with the Ethics Commissioner in full transparency, disclosing his assets, making sure that he's following all directives and making sure that he's in conformity with the laws that govern us in this House. But yesterday, Mr. Speaker, he's announced that he'd go even further, that he'd put his assets in a blind trust, that he'd divest himself of shares in Morneau Chapelle. That's to avoid the distraction and to make sure that we can continue the work that we're doing on behalf of Canadians. And he talks about the middle class. Well, there's not a Minister of Finance who's been more strongly supporting the middle class than this minister, who's reduced child poverty by 40% with the Canada Child Benefit, who's been confident in our economy, investing in infrastructure, who's grown this economy at a fast rate.
Honourable Member for Laurier Sainte-Marie. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance's announcement doesn't dispel any of the doubts about his integrity or judgment. For 2 years, he let people believe that he had already placed his assets in a blind trust. And now, only because he got caught, he's taking action. He should have exercised good judgment and done this at the very beginning. Why do the Liberals always wait for a scandal to break before they finally use basic common sense? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance didn't wait for anything or anyone to meet the Ethics Commissioner. He did that directly after he took office to ensure that he would respect the rules that govern us. He wanted to follow the recommendations. That's what he did. And yesterday he announced that he would go even further by placing his assets in a blind trust and by working with the Commissioner to divest himself of his Morneau Chapelle assets and to continue his important work for middle-class Canadians to reduce inequalities and to increase fairness.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Mogadishu in Somalia are still responding to the horrific terror attack that struck last Saturday. Hospitals remain short of urgently needed medical supplies and families need more support. The world is responding with aid. The U.S., the European Union, Turkey, Kenya, and others have offered their assistance, but Canada has not. Will the government act as our allies have done and provide immediate humanitarian assistance to Somalia?
Honourable Minister of International Development. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that our government is very concerned and is following the situation in Somalia closely. With the Red Cross, we've already invested $2 billion to help the injured following this attack. We are monitoring the situation closely, and we will increase our contribution if necessary. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, Canadians witnessed something unique and unprecedented in federal politics this week. A Minister of Finance moving backwards. He's taken a step back every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He was caught red-handed trying to pay off his deficit by taxing small businesses, workers, and farmers. We also learned that he raked in millions of dollars thanks to a bill that he himself tabled, which breaks all the ethics rules. Now that he's cashed in on his bonus, can the Minister of Finance tell us if he participated in cabinet discussions on Bill C-27, yes or no? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, what the Minister announced this week was a tax cut for small businesses, down to 9% starting in 2019. Mr. Speaker, I'm having a hard time focusing because there are members across the way yelling, so I might ask you to intervene. Mr. Speaker, what the Minister announced is that we stand behind our small businesses like we always have by reducing the small business tax rate and increasing growth. We've also announced changes to our tax proposals after listening to Canadians from coast to coast to make sure that we were doing things right while making our system fairer. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, if you answer the question, there would be less noise, Mr. Speaker. 2 years, that's how long it took the Minister of Finance to achieve his 2013 goal of changing the law so that his firm could make millions. That's how long it took him to profit personally from one of his own government's decisions. 2 years and millions of dollars later, the Minister says that now he's going to sell his shares. Does he take us for fools? Does the Minister of Finance realize that this millionaire's fairy tale is totally unethical? Did he or did he not recuse himself from decisions on C-27?
Secretary of Parliament.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the Minister has done from the beginning is work with the Ethics Commissioner and follow her recommendations. Here, we believe in our institutions, including the Ethics Commissioner's office, and the wisdom that she gives us to ensure that all appearance of conflict of interest is prevented. Not only did the Minister follow her directives, but yesterday he announced that he would go further by divesting himself of his assets and by placing all of his shares in a blind trust, which is even more than what the Ethics Commissioner required of parliamentarians. Thank you.
Member for Lakelands.
Mr. Speaker, in 2013, when the current finance minister was the executive chair of Morneau Shepell, he said, quote, "We need legislation enabling target benefit plans." Then, once he became finance minister, he introduced that legislation. And the finance minister has been receiving tens of thousands of dollars a month from Morneau Shepell the entire time. That's a really obvious conflict. Why didn't the finance minister recuse himself from discussions about Bill C-27?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, what the Minister of Finance did from the time he took office was work with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all the rules were followed and to ensure that the directives that she emitted were also followed. And this includes an ethics screen, and that is a public screen that is still in place today. Yesterday, he announced that he would go further in the interest of transparency, and he would do even more than what was required by the Commissioner by placing his assets in a blind trust and divesting himself of his shares so that he can continue working for Canadians as he has been doing for 2 years and creating a higher growth rate than all other G7 countries, and by creating economic policies that have been applauded by the IMF, by the World Bank, and the OECD. I think that we can be proud of our minister. Thank you.
For Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, that was not the question. In October last year, the finance minister himself introduced Bill C-27, which will set up the same target benefit plans that he previously called for as executive chair of Morneau Shepell. The minister's family company called the bill a, quote, positive step. And, not surprisingly, they welcomed its introduction. The fact is, the finance minister's billion-dollar family company will benefit directly from Bill C-27. So again, specifically and clearly, why didn't the finance minister recuse himself from discussions about Bill C-27?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important to remember that since he was elected, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has respected the rules, laws, and recommendations of the Ethics Commissioner. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, he announced that he would go further in the interest of transparency so that he can continue his work for Canadians. He would set up a blind trust for his assets and divest himself of his shares in Morneau Chappelle. He's a man of integrity who has spent the last 2 years dedicating himself to public service. Thank you.
Member for Durham. Order.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Finance Minister said he declared all his assets to the Ethics Commissioner, but we know that it took questions from the CBC before he revealed his private offshore corporation and updated his ethics filing 2 years late, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister confirm that he received a notice of violation from the Ethics Commissioner ahead of his refiling?
Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I can confirm to the member across the way is that as soon as he was elected, the Minister of Finance got in contact with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all of her recommendations were followed. Yesterday, there was a letter written by the Commissioner, or the member can read it, and it shows that he always followed all of those recommendations. Yesterday, he went further to avoid distraction and to be able to continue his important work for Canadians. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, it took questions from the CBC for the Finance Minister to reveal his private offshore corporation. It took pressure from this House for the Minister to start liquidating assets from his private Alberta corporation. The Prime Minister seems to think the Finance Minister gets to take a mulligan when it comes to his ethics filings. Mr. Speaker, when will this Finance Minister stop throwing the Ethics Commissioner under the bus and start taking responsibility for his failures?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister is by no means throwing the Ethics Commissioner under the bus. He's actually respecting everything the Ethics Commissioner has told him to do and working with her to make sure that not only is he respecting the rules, but he's going above and beyond the rules that govern us in this House. So I think, Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister will continue, has worked with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that he's as forthcoming and transparent with the Ethics Commissioner who's safeguarding the integrity of this House.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, Sears Canada workers and retirees are hurting, and Liberal talking points are not helping. The Liberals are misleading Canadians by saying Sears Canada pensions won't be affected because they are in a trust, but that is not true. The value of workers' pensions will be reduced by 19% due to underfunding by the company, and will further be reduced when Morneau Chappelle delivers their bill for administrating the wind-up of the pension plans. When will the Liberals stop misleading Canadians and deliver a plan for Sears Canada's workers and pensioners?
The Honourable Minister of Science, Innovation and Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member opposite for raising this question. He's done so several times, and we share the concerns that he has with respect to the Sears employees, their families, and the many communities that have been impacted. That is why our government is trying to do everything we can to assist these workers during these difficult times. We've made every effort to connect with Sears employees and pensioners with programs that will assist them. In particular, Service Canada has been meeting with representatives. They've had 80 sessions, and that have been delivered across the country. We'll continue to work with these Sears employees. We'll work with their families to make sure that we assist them during this difficult time, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, Sears workers deserve more than talking points from this minister. Sears Canada employees and retirees worked hard to earn their benefits and pensions, and because the Liberals refuse to fix our broken bankruptcy legislation, Sears Canada executives continue to receive bonuses for a failing company. When will the Liberals stick up for workers and present a real plan to help Sears Canada employees? And 2 years after the election, will they keep their promise and fix the broken bankruptcy legislation in Canada?
Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, it's not talking points when we talk about the employees. It's not talking points when we talk about their families. We sincerely mean this, Mr. Speaker. That is why we are genuinely engaged with the Sears employees and their families to assist them during this difficult time. We also believe in secure pensions. And with respects to Sears, I understand that the current Sears Canada pension funds are held in trust and must be used solely for the benefits of the pensioners. And as a member opposite also well knows, the CCAA process is before the courts, and we're monitoring that situation as well, and will continue to assist the employees and their families.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, Murno Chappelle has a subsidiary registered in the Barbados where corporate tax rates are rock bottom. In clear conflict, the finance minister is also responsible to oversee the tax treaties, including the one with Barbados. While he is wandering around telling small business owners that they are tax cheats and they're not paying their fair share, his wealth is growing in the sunny south. I have a quick question and a simple question. Did the finance minister recuse himself from all discussion regarding the tax treaty with Barbados?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Revenue.
Mr. Speaker, our government is fully committed to fighting tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. In the first two budget, we made historic investments of over $1 billion to CRA to have the right tools to crack down on tax evaders, Mr. Speaker. And our plan is already producing results. We're on track to recuperate $25 billion from our efforts against tax evasion and avoidance since coming to office. And more work is underway, Mr. Speaker. That's what Canadians expect from this government, and that's exactly what we'll continue to deliver for them.
The honourable member for Pont-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, after 2 years, the Minister of Finance needs the Ethics Commissioner's help to fill out his declaration form. Wow. Furthermore, this minister has been helping his firm, Morneau Chappelle, a pension plan specialist, by passing bills that give it an advantage. Now, he's been caught red-handed. Canadians want to know if this Minister of Finance, a shareholder of Morneau Chappelle's subsidiary in Barbados, recused himself from discussions on the tax treaty with Barbados, which is a tax haven. Yes or no? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, what the Minister of Finance did from the time he took office was work with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all of the rules were followed and that all of her recommendations were followed. Yesterday, he announced that he would go further, that he would be placing his assets in a blind trust and divesting himself of his Morneau Chappelle shares. But I would remind the member that 2 years ago, we were wondering if Canada would be going into a recession or if it was actually in a recession. 2 years later, under this finance minister, we have the fastest growing economy in the G7 countries. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the last 10 years. We've seen a 40% reduction in childhood poverty. And we have a minister who's focused on growth and inclusive prosperity.
Innisfil.
You know, Mr. Speaker, their excuses don't cut it because it's almost like a bank robber getting caught and then wanting to turn the money back. It doesn't work that way, Mr. Speaker. And Barbados is the #3 tax haven for wealthy Canadians. The finance minister is responsible for the Canada-Barbados tax treaty, and Morneau Chappelle has a subsidiary on the tiny island. Mr. Speaker, since we now know that the minister's tens of millions of dollars in Morneau Chappelle stocks were not at arm's length in a blind trust for the past 2 years, did the finance minister follow the law and recuse himself from all discussions regarding the tax treaty?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government is fully committed to fighting tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. In the first two budgets, Mr. Speaker, we made historic investments of over $1 billion to CRA to crack down on tax evaders, and we're already seeing results, Mr. Speaker. We've had 627 cases transferred to criminal investigations. We've had 268 search warrants executed, 78 convictions. Let us be absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker, tax evaders can no longer hide. Canadians expect nothing less.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, today the family of Lionel Desmond is on Parliament Hill. And this is a tragedy, the Desmond tragedy, that has impacted the veterans and military community across this country. And I can tell you I was out there this morning, Mr. Speaker. The family is upset. They're upset because the Liberal government and this Minister of Veterans Affairs is not meeting with them. My colleagues and I were out there this morning to meet with the Desmond family, and this afternoon we'll be out there again. My question to the Minister of Veterans Affairs is, will he join me and my colleague from Durham and others in this House to walk 300 feet away to meet with the Desmond family.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Order.
Certainly my condolences to the families involved.
We can't talk of specific cases out of respect for the privacy of the veteran and out of respect for the privacy of the families who are involved here. But there's no question that one suicide is one too many. With the Minister of National Defence, we have come forward with a joint suicide prevention strategy. We've hired 400 new frontline staff. We have reopened 9 offices that were closed by the previous government, Mr. Speaker. We have access to 4,000 mental health professionals and 11 operational stress injury clinics, and we say to veterans and to their families, if you need help, please raise your hand. One suicide is one too many. Thank you.
The Honourable Member, order. The Honourable Member for Desnathy, Mississippi Churchill River.
This week, Indigenous leaders sent a letter to the Prime Minister after being left out of developing new environmental legislation. They say the Liberals are failing to make good on their commitments to work in partnership with Indigenous people. This is not how to establish a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous people. In my northern riding of Desnathy, Mississippi Churchill River, the effects of climate change are felt every day. When will the Liberals work with Indigenous people to develop new environmental legislation?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. No relationship is more important to the Government of Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples. Over the past year, our government has held more than 200 meetings with Indigenous peoples across the country about environmental assessments. We've had weekly technical meetings with the Assembly of First Nations staff and federal officials, and it's also been a very useful means to exchange perspectives and to understand the best way to move forward. We certainly invite the Assembly of First Nations to continue to be part of this process. We are working very hard with Indigenous peoples, with provinces, with civil society and with business to ensure a world-class environmental assessment system that supports reconciliation, protection of the environment, ensures that good projects.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi Bay James Nunavik Gayou.
Mr. Speaker, during the initial negotiations of NAFTA, Indigenous peoples of Canada and Mexico, as well as tribal governments in the U.S., didn't really have a say on the agreement. The government committed to including a chapter on Indigenous rights in its proposals. However, there is great concern that their fundamental rights will be set aside once again because of the Americans' very contentious demands. Will the government commit to including the chapter on Indigenous rights in this renegotiation of NAFTA? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rights of Indigenous peoples must be respected. That is the position of our government. That is why Canada shared a document on the chapter having to do with Indigenous peoples with the United States and Mexico. We continue to work with them on this important issue. Including this chapter in a trade agreement would be a first for Canada, and we are proud to be working on it. Thank you.
Mactaquac.
Monsieur le Président, Groupe Transportation Dan Ross et Tisdale Trucking.
Mr. Speaker, Day Ross Transportation and Tisdale Trucking Limited in my riding of Tobic Mactaquat had the opportunity to testify before the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on the matter of immigration to Atlantic Canada. Our government launched a pilot program to attract and retain immigrants and international graduates to the region.
Unique employer-driven initiative focuses on facilitating successful long-term integration and retention by providing newcomers with a job offer and an individualized settlement plan. Can the Minister of Immigration update this House on the ways the government can further support employers through this new pilot program? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Immigration and Refugees.
Monsieur le Président, je veux remercier. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question.
Is a tremendous opportunity to attract skilled newcomers and their families to Atlantic Canada, and it represents a new approach in immigration. This one-of-a-kind program works with employers to settle and integrate not only the skilled immigrants but their families, and will now be complemented by a specialized team at IRCC to make sure that employers are walked over and make sure that they work through the immigration process. Our government is very much committed to implementing real solutions through the Atlantic Growth Strategy to strengthen the Atlantic Canadian economy. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Finance Minister stood in this House and claimed the reason he failed to disclose his offshore corporation to the Ethics Commissioner was due to an early administrative error. Can the Minister confirm that if any Canadian fails to disclose foreign companies to the appropriate government body, they can make the problem disappear simply by claiming it is an early administrative error? Or does this only work if you're the Prime Minister's right-hand man?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Finance Minister has worked from the very beginning, right after the election, with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that he's in full compliance with the rules that govern us in this House, to make sure that he follows all the recommendations that she puts forward, and he has done so. Namely, he's put up a conflict of interest wall, which she recommended. This is still up, but yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to remind the member, the Minister has announced that he'd go even further and place his assets in a blind trust, divest himself of all the shares him and his family have in Morneau Chapelle. This is a man of great integrity who's dedicated his last 2 years to public service with great results for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary Confederation.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister failed. He failed to declare his offshore corporation to the Ethics Commissioner. He was required to disclose this 2 years ago before his claims, but he claims, though, that it was because of early administrative errors. No one is buying this, Mr. Speaker. He hid this from Canadians until he got caught. How can we trust anything the minister says now when we know he's been deceiving Canadians for so long?
Hear, hear. Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have all the trust in the Ethics Commissioner to set the right path forward for parliamentarians, to provide with the good recommendations, and this Minister has worked with the Ethics Commissioner from the very beginning to make sure that he's in full compliance with the rules, that he follows her recommendations, which he has done. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, as I've mentioned, he's announced he'd go even further to avoid the distraction and keep focusing on the real work he's been doing for Canadians for the last 2 years, steering our economy back into the right direction, the direction of growth, the direction of prosperity, the direction of prosperity for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on Thanksgiving weekend, the CRA employee told the Globe and Mail that the government was going to tax employee discounts. Then, after a full day of confused and contradictory messages from the Liberals, the minister backtracked and threw her own bureaucrats under the bus. The Council of Retailers knew that this was coming, and they warned the Finance Committee in September. So why is the minister trying to tax discounts for retail and restaurant workers and then blaming it all on her bureaucrats?
Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the last 2 years, our government has been focused on helping the middle class and those working hard to join it. The document from agency did not reflect the intention of our government. It has been removed and is being reviewed. We will continue to ensure that our actions support the middle class, and like the Prime Minister stated, we will not be going after anyone's retail employee discounts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, the Revenue Minister acts like she was the last one to know that the CRA wants to tax employee discounts. When the plan became public, she blamed the agency and accepted no responsibility. With the Finance Minister attacking small businesses and hiding his assets while concealing his conflicts of interest, and the Revenue Minister wanting to tax benefits for some of the lowest paid workers in Canada, when will these ministers stand up and take responsibility for their actions instead of just blaming others?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I just mentioned, since day one, our government has been focused on helping the middle class. The document from the agency did not reflect the intention of our government. It has been removed and is being reviewed. We will continue to ensure that our actions support the middle class, and like Prime Minister stated, we will not be going after anyone's retail employee discounts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
More and more Nanaimo Ladysmith constituents have faced blocks getting the government services they need. My office is flooded with desperate requests from people who can't get access to the help they need. They wait hours on the phone only to be told, go to the website and fill out a form. Agencies are underfunded, leaving workers scrambling to deal with the growing backlog. The Liberals promised so much more. When will they hire back the workers the Conservatives cut and get Canadians access to the services they need.
The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to receive this question. Our government believes that it's very important that Canadians receive the benefits and the services they deserve and that they need. We have put into place since Budget 2016 measures which are already generating significant benefits for EI, employment insurance, for instance. The rate at which Canadians are now able to connect through the call centre has increased from 29% to 82% in less than 18 months. We have a lot of work to do, and we'll continue to do it, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, the Phoenix pay system is creating tons of anxiety on Parks Canada, on Fisheries and Oceans, and other Government of Canada employees in my riding of Courtenay Alberni. My office is receiving desperate pleas from workers who are still waiting to get paid. The Phoenix fiasco has been dragging on for almost 2 years, and still there's no end in sight. What is this government's plan to ensure workers get the pay they so desperately need? And when will the Phoenix backlog finally be cleared?
Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is unacceptable that hardworking public services are not paid the money they're owed. These issues have caused real hardships for many public services and their families, and they shouldn't have to face them. Resolving this as quickly as possible is our priority. That's why we're focused on improving our governance, improving business processes, increasing technical and human capacity, and rest assured, Mr. Speaker, we will leave no stone unturned.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently at the Justice Committee, we heard from a number of victims groups, including Families for Justice, who made the very reasonable proposal that anyone convicted of killing somebody because of their drunken driving should go to jail for at least 5 years. Now, the Liberals were very quick to reject this common sense proposal. Why do they think that is so unreasonable?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice, one of them.
Mr. Speaker, our government is absolutely committed to improving road safety, and that's why we brought forward strong legislation to provide law enforcement with the tools that they need to detect and to prosecute the most serious of offenders and to keep our roadways safe. We've gone beyond merely introducing legislation, but ensured that they also have the resources and the training by announcing $161 million for the training of those officers and the providing of those resources. Mr. Speaker, it's through those actions that we are going to save lives.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton. Order.
Speaker, sentences handed down for impaired driving causing death are an absolute joke, with offenders walking away with fines as low as $1,500. Instead of standing up for victims, Liberal MPs voted to defeat a Conservative amendment to Bill C-46 to provide for a 5-year mandatory sentence for impaired drivers who kill. Why does the minister think it is okay for impaired drivers who kill to walk away with a slap on the wrist?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, we absolutely do not believe that impaired drivers should be able to drive on our roadways without a reasonable prospect of getting caught. They have to know that there are consequences for their action. The legislation that we have introduced provides for strong consequences, and when the evidence warrants it, appropriate sentences will be afforded to those offenders.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, Diabetes Canada is complaining that the Canada Revenue Agency is now rejecting people with diabetes from receiving the disability tax credit because their disability doesn't occupy more than 14 hours of their time in a week. People with type 1 diabetes have to perform 600 steps for their treatment each day. So the Liberals are now increasing taxes on disabled people. Is there anything this Liberal government won't tax other than the Prime Minister's family fortunes and the Finance Minister's many corporations?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Revenue.
Mr. Speaker, our government has committed to ensuring that the agency delivers quality service to Canadians and that all Canadians have access to the credits and benefits that they deserve. We know that the disability tax credit is an extremely important credit for individuals with severe and prolonged impairments in physical or mental functions. That is why our government is making it possible for nurse practitioners to complete the applications of their patients. These changes make it easier for Canadians with disability to access this extremely important credit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for the Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, according to the Conference Board of Canada, we know that tobacco use in Canada costs the Canadian economy billions of dollars each year. We also know that cigarette smoking is still the leading cause of premature death in Canada. What is the Minister of Health doing to address tobacco addiction and the use of tobacco in our country? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking the member from the Bay of Quinte for the tireless work that he does on behalf of his constituents and for his strong advocacy on this important health issue. Mr. Speaker, we have all seen the tragic statistics. Tobacco kills more than 45,000 Canadians each year. Numbers like these are precisely why our government is taking action by making tobacco use less appealing, especially to youth. We remain committed to introducing plain packaging and to reducing tobacco use in Canada to less than 5% by 2035. Our government will work to better protect the health and safety of all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta is getting eaten alive. Jasper Park is turning brown due to the pine beetle infestation. Now they are fed up with Parks Canada and they are moving into the foothills region. From 40,000 trees last year to over 500,000 this year. Wow. Our previous Conservative government gave $8 million to fight this. What is the Minister of Natural Resources going to do to stop the pine beetles from attacking our forests?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And certainly invasive species in our forest sector is something that we have dealt with over the decades and centuries in this country. We are working hard with our partners in the forest sector to find solutions to some of these challenges. There are challenges on the East Coast as well as in Alberta. I want to assure the member that we are seized with the issue and will continue to work with the Minister of Environment and the sector to come up with a solution to this challenging problem. Thank you.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, internationally trained newcomers in my riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore need help getting their credentials recognized in the new country they now call home. Newcomers want to be productive members of society, but sometimes navigating the Canadian system for those who are trained abroad can be complicated. They need meaningful assistance so they can achieve their professional and personal potential. Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour update this House on measures taken to support internationally trained newcomers?
Good job. Good. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member from Etobicoke Lakeshore for his strong advocacy on this particular issue. That's right. He deserves a round of applause. As part of the targeted employment strategy for newcomers, Mr. Speaker, we've launched a call for proposals for the Foreign Credential Recognition Loans Program. This program will offer loans to help with the recognition process. Helping newcomers get their foreign credentials recognized faster will allow them to join the Canadian workforce faster. This is critical to growing our economy and strengthening our middle class.
Yeah.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou.
For veterans, it is not just a matter of putting together beautiful public policy. It is a matter of reaching out, giving a hand, and listening. A year ago, there was a Veterans on the Hill on hunger strike. The minister refused to go meet him. Today, the Desmond family is on the Hill. They need the minister here and compassion. Will you go meet them today, right now, after QP in a few minutes?
Right here.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans.
I will meet with the family at a convenient time today. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, what's happening in Spain is appalling. It's no longer the will of Catalans to achieve independence that's being questioned. Madrid is attacking the fundamental tenets of democracy, the right to vote, freedom of expression, freedom of association. And now, even the independent status of the Catalonian government are being taken away. Will the Canadian government finally stand up for democracy and tell the government of Spain that enough is enough with attacking the Catalans? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, Canada appreciates its relationship with Spain, and we are following what's happening in that country very closely. We encourage the parties to find a peaceful solution to this debate and respect the rule of law and within the framework of the Spanish Constitution. The Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-Lille. Mr. Speaker, every year the families of Quebec's seasonal workers in Lac-Saint-Jean and elsewhere go through up to 17 weeks of poverty because the employment insurance system does not match up with their reality. There have been many pilot projects to increase the number of weeks of benefits extended to seasonal workers, and benefits have been extended to regions that depend on oil, but not for Quebec. Will the Liberal government re-implement pilot projects to extend benefits to Quebec seasonal workers? The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for this question, which is very relevant. We do believe in the importance of EI, which guarantees not only revenue safety in circumstances that can be very difficult, but also facilitate the transition towards new jobs. We have implemented since April 2016 significant measures that counter some of the that have been misunderstood. We've been doing much better since April 2016, and we plan to do much better. Thank you. The Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-Lille. Again, evasive answers. For 12 years, when it designated the woodland caribou as a vulnerable species, Quebec implemented productive measures, and they are working. 3/4 of caribou can be found in areas where there's no forestry activity, and where they cohabitate with human activity, their numbers keep going up. Because Quebec's measures are working, why is the government refusing to consider them, and why is it leaving Lac-Saint-Jean's forestry workers out in the cold? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, or rather the Honourable Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to working with the provinces as well as the municipality of Lac-Saint-Jean and the province of Quebec and the municipalities all throughout Canada in order to protect and reestablish endangered species in Canada, including caribou. The environment and the economy need to work together. Therefore, we are working very closely with provinces, territories, and municipalities.
Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The offshore petroleum boards in Atlantic Canada, the Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Board, the Canada Newfoundland Labrador Offshore Board, have legislated mandates to expand oil and gas activity in the offshore. They've never had any role in environmental assessment. If they did, it would be a conflict of interest. Now it appears the Liberals are following through on Stephen Harper's plans to put these boards involved in environmental assessment where they shouldn't be. Can the Minister of Environment assure this House that she'll keep the offshore boards out of environmental assessment?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for her continued advocacy on the environment. We understand that we need to rebuild trust in our environmental assessment system, that we need to make sure that the environment and the economy go together. That is why we are working extraordinarily hard with provinces, with Indigenous peoples, with civil society, with business, to ensure that we have a world-class environmental assessment system that protects the environment, supports reconciliation, and ensures that good projects go ahead in a timely way with regulatory certainty.
Here, here. And this will conclude a question period for today. Tabling of documents. Dépôt de documents. Dépôt de projet de loi émanant du gouvernement.
Introduction of government bills.
Déclaration de ministre. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committee. Introduction of private members bill. Mrs. Shanahan, seconded by Mr. Mandicino, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Change the Name of the Electoral District of Chateauguay-Lacal. This motion is deemed adopted. The honourable member for Chateauguay-Lacal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, but this is not always the case for the name of a riding. Donc, au nom de mes
And therefore, on behalf of my constituents, I'm very proud to rise and introduce my private member's bill, which proposes to change the name of my riding to Chateauguay-les-Jardins de Napierville. And the reasons are very clear for the change. First, the municipality of La Colle is in the neighboring riding, the riding of Saint-Jean. And it is the municipality of Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle that is in our riding. So this is confusing for constituents on both sides of the riding boundaries. I'd like to thank my constituents for being here today to support my bill. Second, we're very proud that the name includes Jardin de Napierville because this